Today's conversation is on relationships. Do you lose clarity in your relationships? Do relationships look complicated? In this conversation, we'll explore why this happens and how all relationships, romantic love relationships, family relationships, relationships with coworkers, even your neighbors and friends, can be experienced in a fresh new way. My guest, Della Adey-Jones, who is a 3 principles practitioner specializing in narcissism and codependency, will be joining my conversation to support you in gaining some fresh insights on how your relationships can be more fruitful. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining today's conversation. I think it's going to be a rich conversation because in my practice and definitely in my guest's practice, I think for any professional, coaching professional, what am I talking about? Probably any professional, the topic of relationships is going to come up across the board. If you're a human being, you're going to have relationships in your vernacular and trying to navigate those most fruitfully for you and really successfully and fulfilling. So today my guest is Della Adey-Jones. She is a 3 principles practitioner specializing in the area of codependency and narcissistic abuse. And we got together. We're colleagues. We've worked together and explored many topics together. So I wanted to invite her to be my guest to share her specialty, which is in, I'll say, dysfunctional patterns that occur in relationships that kind of get normalized in our society. So maybe one way of saying it. And also to talk about how we both notice that there are incredibly successful people in the world, incredibly successful on all levels, whatever that definition might be for you. But when it comes to relationships, oftentimes they lose all sense of clarity. Doesn't look direct, it doesn't look simple, it looks complicated. It's like the curtain of clarity disappears on the topic of relationships and things get muddled. And so Dale and I wanted to have a conversation about that and to really see that relationships are no different than anything else. And other than, it looks to me that relationships come so loaded with concepts and definitions. And also our role in relationships come loaded with concepts and definitions. And that's where, to me, clarity goes out the window. Because who knows how many generations of concepts around relationships are we bringing to the conversation. So I'd like to introduce Dale. Dale resides in California. She has 2 beautiful sons, and she speaks from a wealth of experience and knowledge on the topic. So would you mind just saying a little bit about yourself, Dale?
Yeah, absolutely. It's lovely to be here, and thank you all for joining us. So yeah, I was born in Wales in 1959, and it was a very unusual upbringing. I won't go into all the details. You can check it out on other interviews, but very basically I was born in illegitimate during the 50s, and it was created quite a lot of shame growing up, and my father never acknowledged me, even though I saw him every day going to school, and it left me feeling with this feeling of like not being good enough, and it really impacted how I showed up in relationships. And so I went from being very successful as a costume designer in Hollywood before getting married, and then but I wouldn't even talk about my marriage, but other relationships. I was successful in the workforce, but I had really messy relationships, put it that way. I was not very good at them. So as I said, about 5 years ago was when I'd heard about the principles in 2009, but it was 5 years ago where I really came across them, and it really set me free from my codependency. As I mentioned, I've been in therapy for 30 years trying to figure out why I was having these disastrous relationships, or having conflict at least. And definitely helped me, but it didn't give me the freedom I was looking for. So that's why I absolutely am passionate about sharing this understanding with people that are challenged. As Cherie said, they're highly successful in other areas of their life, but relationships just seem to be the blind spot. So I've just jotted down here, I'm going to cheat, I've got my little list here, I just want to keep myself on track. Some of the most common reasons why we lose ourselves in a relationship. And so just feel free to just jump in, question, it's just a quick little list here. But so you're all familiar with the understanding of the three principles. But what most of us don't understand, if we don't understand this understanding, is that our feelings come via our thinking. So we feel the effects of our thinking. Most of us feel that we are feeling the effects of the person we're in a relationship with. Now, whether that's your partner, your boss, your parent, your child, or whoever. And we often get frustrated and with these people in our lives because we feel that they're making us angry, they're making us upset. And it can even also be that, they're making us feel love towards them, which sometimes, in an unhealthy relationship, you don't leave because you're like, but this is my source of love. So it's just a misunderstanding of the mind that it's the other person that's making us feel a certain way. The other thing that I saw when I came across this understanding was, that was the first big one. It's like, oh my God. So it's not the other person making me feel the way I am. I'm doing it to myself, which is fabulous when you take responsibility for your part, because you can't ever change another person. You can only change how you're seeing something. So the second one was really, I'd heard it for years. I was in every spiritual practice, we're all born equal, we're all created equal. And it was like, yeah, not me. You don't understand. I came in broken. I shouldn't even be here. But for some reason, I saw it when I saw the principles. I saw it in a different way. I really felt it on the inside. I knew that, I was equal to everybody else. And I didn't need to look to other people for validation. And again, whether it was from my partner, my boss, or whoever, I was okay inside. And then with that neutrality, when you're in a relationship with somebody, when you're sort of like differentiated and standing solid in the grounding of who you are, and there's not that neediness and the neediness for somebody else to be a certain way and give you the compliments and support you, and that becomes like that. So it really helped me go, oh my God, okay. And I really stood in the truth of who I was. Wasn't bending myself into a pretzel. That was the other thing. I was a lifelong people pleaser. If I negate my own needs, then you'll love me, then you'll like me, then you won't abandon me. And that's big, you lose yourself right there. When you there's nothing wrong with being a really lovely, caring person, but when it's all about people pleasing and negating your own needs to get that validation, then it starts getting messy.
And Del, just to interject during that part, so many clients are, I'll say, looking for love via online sites and such, and so they are in any way of meeting someone. And I hear it to my clients so oftentimes that they write a profile, not so much from the truth of who they are, from the wholeness of who they are, but they write a profile more like a marketing ad to make it match the market, so to speak.
Yeah. That's so funny to say that, because my next one is be yourself. Please just show up. I have a friend, she's so funny. She's a very strong personality, and she said, I'm Marmite. You either like me or you don't, but you know what you're getting, and I love that phrase, because it really is. It's just be yourself. There's nothing worse than creating a false self that you think somebody else is going to like. It's exhausting keeping that up. It's just be your wonderful, human, quirky, nobody else on the planet is like you. Don't try and be like anybody else. Just really own who you are. And yes, people will, maybe not like you, maybe not be attracted to you, but God, thank God you've just cleared out people that are not your tribe. Or why are you wasting your time? It's their right to just not go, you're not my cup of tea, Mm-hmm. But it's so important. And I'm going to interject here. When I divorced 10 years ago, I went on a dating site, and I separated 13 years ago, but the first year I took off because I knew that I needed to sort myself out and not be in a relationship and figure out what I was doing to attract unhealthy relationships. But when I started dating, I started to see that, I really got a sense of like you say, Cherie, those ads that, or rather the ad is an ad, basically, but the profiles that are, I could sense the fakeness behind them. And I've been in a relationship now with my partner for the last 10 years. And it was something about the honesty of his face, of his profile. And it said, finally, after all these years, my ex-wife and I get on. And I just thought, that's the truth, it felt truthful. It was like, as opposed to, I love to drive up PCH with my convertible and, pictures of people posing outside flashy cars and big houses. And it was like, I could just feel it wasn't authentic. And, my boyfriend is amazing. He's an incredible human being, and he is who he is. And you know what you're getting with him always. So you can tell that you'll get a fine-tuned ear to the ones that are not their truthful selves. The other big one for me, because even after I divorced, I was still going to therapy every week, going, I don't understand how this could be happening. I can't, and I might as well have stayed married. I was, for all intents and purposes, I was still emotionally like that. And when I understood separate realities and really understood it, that any behavior that my partner had engaged in, whatever, affairs, things like that, had nothing to do with me. They were just, he was just acting out, or any of those old relationships were acting out a behavior based on the thinking or the feeling they were having from their thinking. That was it. It didn't mean that I was worthless, that I wasn't good enough, and I wasn't this, and I wasn't that. It just meant that they live in a separate reality. Now, I will own, during my marriage, I used to see the real world out there, and I would find it sort of outrageous that you couldn't see the same world I was seeing and would behave in a certain way. Now, I know that I see my world through my separate reality. And there is a world of form out there. I do believe there is, and I do believe we're impacted by it. But we all walk around in our own thought-created bubble. And to expect somebody else to see what I'm seeing exactly the same way, just was outrageous, quite honestly. And now, because I know that so well, I just don't have that expectation from anybody. Even my children. It's just like, hey, you see it your way, I see it mine. But it hit me at a deeper level. It wasn't just like, I understood people had different perspectives, but I still thought it was a different perspective on the same reality. And when I realized there's a subtle difference there. We live in this separate reality. So that was massive for me in helping the quality of my relationships. And then also going back to that sort of, even if somebody is behaving in a certain way that is hurtful or painful, just understanding the psychological innocence of everybody. We're all doing the best we can with the thinking we have in that moment. And And just because you can see that, but what can happen if somebody is behaving in a way that's unacceptable to you in a relationship, you don't have to stick around and say, well, they're all psychologically innocent, I should give them a pass. It's like, no, you can completely be okay with, you can see their innocence, but you can just say, I don't want to be in this environment. This doesn't feel good to me. So you can leave an environment with a much, you don't have to have all the sort of reasons of why they're so bad and this is why you're leaving and or whatever, or this is why I'm not tolerating it. You can just say, you know what, I see your psychological innocence, but it's not working for me. And you can just separate with neutrality, which is incredible. And then maintaining healthy boundaries, it's an extension of that. It's the same thing. It's like, we basically teach other people how to treat us. And if you have a healthy boundary and somebody violates that boundary or keeps pushing it, and you allow that to happen, I see this in a lot of relationships, or you make a threat that you don't follow through on, like, if you do this again, I'm leaving, and then you don't, or whatever it is. It's you maintain the boundary, but set a consequence that you're going to follow through on. And this is especially with children. Sometimes parents get very emotional and they overreact to a boundary issue, and then they feel bad, and it's like, oh, I've said too much. I didn't really mean it. Wasn't that bad. All you've done is to teach them that you've got really weak boundaries. So again, it's just sort of know what's acceptable and what's not, and know that. And again, it can be with your partner, it could be with your boss or your parent or whatever. It's, I have clients that, have narcissistic parents that are aging right now. And they've even had their parent move back in with them. And they're like, oh my God, I'm going through my childhood again. And it's like, how to set a loving boundary that you can't change the other person, but you can remove yourself. So, and then the other one is, when we see our own resilience and our own well-being, when we see it in ourselves, we don't, put up with unhealthy situations. We know we're strong enough to leave. A lot of people stay in relationships because they have this misunderstanding that their strength and their security comes from being in that relationship. Now, when they know that we have resilience, we can, I used to live in a massive, giant, great big mansion over the Pacific Ocean, tennis court, swimming pool, everything. All went in the divorce. I live in a mobile home, which is lovely, and I'm very happy here, and I'm totally fine. Now, if you told me 13 years ago that that's what my life was going to be, I probably would have been very afraid and compromised my situation to not, lose what I would have considered my material security. So just knowing that that's always within you, and life's just a fabulous wild ride, and just enjoy it. I always say I've had the privilege of seeing Malibu from a mansion to a mobile home and everything in between. And it just makes life interesting,
But Dell, at that point I've heard it from both male clients and female clients that not only do they feel, it's not always, I'll say their source of good is in their partner. They really feel like their connection to their higher intelligence is via their partner. Their financial well-being is attached, their resourcefulness is attached to their partner. Like, so many things that they do not see they possess within themselves, but they do see these qualities, these abilities in their partner, but they don't understand that they are of the same ingredients.
You know what?
Forfeit so much on that.
Yeah, you're reminding me of something I heard years and years ago, and it's like, if you said to some person in some indigenous tribe that had never seen, Western culture or anything, do you want a McDonald's? They would just look at you and go, like, what are you even talking about? And if we see something in somebody else, strength, wisdom, intelligence, is because we know it. We know it for ourselves. Otherwise, we couldn't identify it in somebody else. We wouldn't have the capacity to see it in another if we hadn't experienced it for ourselves. So, and again, that understanding that we're all born equal. Yes, at times it feels like, I was a stay-at-home mother for many, many years. I've, given up my financial income, or financial independence. And I was very scared when I came out of that marriage and lost it all. But all it did was help me get creative and, dig into what my resources were, what I had to share, what I could help people with. So, I think it was a gift. It was such a gift. I always say, if I'd got the cushy divorce, and I would never have found myself. It was through the hardship that I actually got to witness my strengths and my resourcefulness and my resilience and wisdom and everything. Mm-hmm. And now the other one, the other side of this is that sometimes people have the misunderstanding that, again, they don't see that resilience and wisdom and innate well-being in the other person. And they think they have to help the other person. The other person, whether it's a child or a partner, or especially if you have a partner that has addictive behaviors, it's like, I can't leave them. I have to, they need me. Well, when we see that same resilience and well-being, is in them, it's like, okay, I'm not their savior. I'm not. It helps with parenting for a start, because you stop nagging. At a certain age, your children really get that, what your values are and what you believe is the right thing they should be doing. And after that, you just become sort of nagging, and they might resist or push back or rebel against it. So the more that you can just trust that they have their own wisdom, their own inner guidance, and they're going to be okay. And sometimes it might look like they're falling, but they will learn from that. That's their path. It's much better than you going in there and, micromanaging and thinking that, somehow your wisdom is better than their wisdom. It's like, no, your wisdom's for you. That's it.
Oh, I think that really elevates the relationship. It changes, It really raises the consciousness of the relationship, which will, right there, bear better fruit than feeling like someone is defective or deficient, whether it's yourself or the person you're in relationship with.
Absolutely. That's a big thing in an intimate relationship. Mm-hmm. The power dynamic, they call it. If one partner is being domineering or belittling the other partner, it sets them up as a parental figure in the relationship, and the other person starts to feel like the child in the relationship. That's never going to work out. Nobody wants to be in a loving relationship with their parent or their child, and in an intimate relationship. It's going to upset. That's just does not work. And you can go the other way, but that's a big one. So yes, seeing each other as, perfectly healthy and whole with separate realities that sees the world differently, but there is that mutual respect there. That's and I love that you pointed that out. It's really important for a healthy relationship. Again, as I said, sometimes in an intimate relationship, even in the healthiest relationship, some people sort of expect their partner to provide all their emotional needs, and that's just not possible. Just sort of understanding that one person cannot be everything to you, and to just, and that's why it's so important to maintain healthy, a lot of people I work with end up sort of making their partner the most important person in their life, and then they let friendships fall away, or, even families sometimes, if there's any, disharmony in the relationship. And then they just become so immersed in that one-on-one relationship, they don't have a brilliant support system behind them if they were ever to choose to leave or or they just don't feel strong enough to stand up for themselves, or different things like that. So it's so important to maintain, the friendships and family connections. Also, and we talked about this earlier, Cherie, not everybody that finds themselves in difficult relationships has come from a challenging childhood or traumatic childhood. Some really high achieving men and women, they get their self-worth from their achievements and not being a quitter and type A personalities, and they will work on a relationship and work on the relationship when it really needs sort of maybe leaving, or but again, it's I have clients, I was just telling Cherie, that highly successul, but they feel like a failure because they're so unhappy, or they've had a divorce and they can't get over. I failed. I should be able to make anything work. And so that's another one I see a lot.
Well, I think that one is a prime example, Dale, of these concepts that we hold around relationship, like something like I'm smart enough, I should have been able to figure out how to make it work, is something that comes in and contaminates relationship versus letting it be wide open. And you can see, I've seen it, I know you've seen it, that people have really limited their experience of life because that stays on their dashboard. They're looking at some concept about relationships again and again and again, and that concept stays alive, and they can try to solve it for a lifetime. But in the innocence, if we were really more aware of the simplicity of relationships, that any concept is going to contaminate the potential of a very rich relationship.
Yeah. And also just, again, talking about the concepts that a relationship should look a certain way. Mm-hmm. If you're two consenting adults, you make up the rules for yourself. It's nobody else's business what you come to an agreement on, what works for you in your relationship. And that's, and again, I even work with some people that, are in a relationship with a narcissistic personality disorder, and I'm always like, hey, nobody says you should stay or leave. It's up to you. I mean, there are certain things that are helpful if you want to stay, and there's many reasons to stay. Children, money, whatever it is, and that there are ways to coexist with another person that really lowers the friction and the one of them being expectation that they change. That's a massive one. There's another one in a relationship. We tend to believe that if the other person changes, we'll be happier,
or that they need to change for me to feel better.
Well, exactly. That's another
way of saying the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I could be happier if they were different. It's like
exactly.
Yeah. So, Dell, I think I would just love to see if anybody has any questions, because we have lots of angles of this to look at and talk about. But if anybody has any kind of question on their mind that they'd like to voice, we'd love to open the floor of possibilities. Does anybody have a question? Yes.
I don't know. I came in late, and so when you were talking about the 3 Ps, what are the 3 Ps?
You, Cherie, well,
either one.
Yeah, well, it's an understanding that I'll share from my perspective, and Cherie has a fabulous different way of sharing it, so I think it'd be helpful from both perspectives. So basically, it's an understanding called the 3 principles, and the 3 principles are mind, consciousness, and thought. It's just and those 3 things are the same. It points in the same direction of how we experience life. I don't normally go into, well, consciousness is our awareness, level of awareness. Mind is usually referred to as either, depending on if you believe in God or a spirit, or the intelligence behind life that's constantly moving through us. And then thought is, the nature of the thought is just coming through us, constantly. It's what we sort of catch on to, and then we feel the effects of that thinking, whether it's about somebody or another, our environment or whatever it is. But our thinking is constantly flowing through us, or the concept of thought. So that's the simple way of putting it. So Cherie, you share yours.
Well, I think just exactly what you said, in that the part being of we feel our thinking. We're not feeling life. We're feeling our thinking all the time. And as Dale had mentioned earlier in the conversation, how in relationship, parties come together from each person is living in a thought-created reality of their own, and see it as real and absolute about life. And so it's a separate reality that in our innocence, it's just the way it happens, that we're thinkers, we think, we don't realize we live in that thinking. And that's one of the major pieces. We feel like that is truth, a voice of truth coming to us, and it's just the voice of our personal thinking. We don't have to react to everything because it's going to be a limitless stream of thought that is passing through us. And B, once we understand that every human being is thinking, every human being is reacting to their thinking in any moment, that's all that's going on, you can have more compassion and understanding for a person. So the 3 Ps, to say exactly what Dell said, is like, it's how human beings have a psychological experience of life. We live in a thought-created reality of our own. Like you said, we're all on a webinar, we think we are, but our experience of this webinar is very personal to us, and that's going to be based on our own. I'm
going to use my little prop because I love it. I'm showing off. So this is who we all are at our center, at our essence. This happens to be a Buddha. It could be that just symbolizes for me who I am at my essence, which is pure love, pure joy, pure peace. It's just that's where we're all connected. We all come into the world from this place. And then what happens is, as I said, we live in these thought-created little sort of, like, it's almost like, those old astronauts have that big bubble thing on their head. And what happens is we have a lot of thinking. And when we've got a lot of thinking...
And a lot of concepts, same thing.
A lot of concepts, exactly. A lot of ideas of how things should be. We lose sight of who we are. We just lose sight. That's all that's happened, is because we start, instead of like being connected with the essence of who we are, we get caught up in this thinking. We're like, we're up here listening to all those thoughts and things like that. But when you see that, when our minds settle, and as Cherie said, when we just realize that, hey, we're all doing this, we all came from the same, that's the psychological innocence right there inside, that beautiful essence of who we are. And some people get really caught up in their thinking, and they start acting out on their thinking, and they lose sight of who they really are at their essence. That's why, sometimes people with sort of narcissistic personality disorder, even though they appear to be powerful and dominant and domineering, they're actually coming from a place of deep insecurity. There's a fear that there's not enough in the world, or that love isn't secure. So, they don't know the love's coming from within them. So they might want to dominate or manipulate and things like that. And it's all fear-based. And it's coming just from a lot of fearful thinking, insecure, fearful thinking. So you can see the innocence of it. But as I said, if you're in a relationship with somebody like that, you don't have to sort of stay in the situation. If it's not changing, leave with love.
That's kind of an elevator speech on what she's pointing to, Beth, but that's the best we can do.
Say that again.
I said it's kind of an elevator speech on her question, but it's the best we can do to condense it down to.
Yeah, we could spend years explaining it.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Thank you. That was a good explanation. That was very, very good. And I really like the image of our thoughts and the snow globe being shaken up and all. Oh my gosh, that is so accurate and so true, right? And then it's just, and then how you described when our mind settles, right? All of that static or that noise or the snow just goes whoosh, like that. So thank you. That was a good explanation. I appreciate that.
Oh, good, wonderful.
You can see that the clarity is in that. The clarity is always with you.
Mm-hmm.
We think we've lost it, but it's like no. The clarity is always there. It just, like you said, we get so busy trying to solve something, figure it out, work it out, that's the equivalent of the snow in the globe.
Exactly. Whereas that essence of who we are, that, as Cherie said, has never left, isn't anywhere. It's who we are at our core. When we stop looking in this direction of our personal thinking to solve problems from, because we've created the problems up there and then we're trying to solve them up there. When we just settle, that wisdom is constantly directing us, constantly moving through us, constantly. It's those moments when you go, whoa, where did that come from? When you're not thinking about something, it's like, why don't you try that? Or what that? And that's just wisdom, just living through you and guiding you and helping you navigate through life. And it's so beautiful. I mean, my God, I don't spend much time up here anymore. I always say I'm lucky that I considered myself not that bright, so I don't trust that thinking anyway. So I'm happy not to hang out there. I'd rather come from a place of just being lived through and guided, and it feels brilliant.
And Beth, I'll say it's that intelligence that is moving us through our life when we're not watching ourselves.
Yeah.
Typically when we're watching ourselves is when we're all up in the snow. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we're being moved and lived all day long, making impacts, making choices, or we're just living life, and that is, to me, the purest demonstration of this intelligence moving us.
Yeah. Exactly. It's what's beating our heart at night. It's what's making our lungs work. We think we innocently believe that we're doing it all. Well, somebody's taking over when we're asleep. So,
yeah. Any other questions?
So I have a question.
Great.
So, Della, it's nice to meet you. And I've been around the principles working with Cherie for a few years now. So this one thing that I still have such opportunity around is in regard to when people behave in less than pleasant ways, and I get stuck in this, like, it's just my thinking that is causing my sadness, or then it ends up making me feel like there's something wrong with me.
yeah.
And so I'm curious if you have a perspective on that, because like if somebody like it shows up like they're nice part of the time, and then they show up like they have this Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde sort of personality, right? Mm-hmm. So then it's just like I said, I get caught up in, like, if I could think about this person different, maybe they wouldn't have the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde sort of personality. So do you have a perspective on that?
Yes, big time.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that's mostly the work I do, and it's a whole separate conversation because it's a big conversation, and I do have a master's in spiritual psychology. So unlike some principles teachers, I do sort of understand the psychology of what can happen in a relationship like that. say you're with somebody that has that Jekyll and Hyde personality, there are actually things that happen within the brain chemistry that actually cause confusion. And I won't go into it here because it's a whole other subject. But often people that find themselves in that dynamic end up doubting themselves. And especially when they have an understanding of the principles, they're like, well, if I'm feeling my thinking, then if I could just change my thinking, I wouldn't be feeling this way. But, you know, my personal view is, like, I'll take my boyfriend right now, for example. He is as steady as a rock. I sometimes get very irritated with him. And I know that that is me, because he is the same day in, day out. He's not moody, he's not anything. So if I'm reactive, I know it's my thinking. I know I've just got whatever, I'm in a low mood, I'm whatever. Now, if somebody's behavior is dramatically different, Jekyll and Hyde, for example, I personally believe, and Cherie might disagree with me because I know some three principles teachers do, but Sydney Banks said that life is a contact sport. And I believe that if he said that, the way I interpret it is, there are some life events that do impact us. Now, how we choose to react to them are different. You know, when my mother passed away, I'm one of 7 children. We had 7 very different reactions. Now, you could say, well, your mother's passed away, it's going to make you feel this way. And I looked around, and I was like, wow, what a range of different reactions to my mother's passing. So I think when somebody's behavior is erratic like that, Jekyll and Hyde, I do believe it can impact us. And I think that's where it's important to not take things personally and to not sort of get into what's wrong with me, why are they acting like this? Separate realities. They're just acting and thinking because of rather behaving and acting due to their thinking. So over here, there's you. Now, yes, you can change how you react to it. You can just be an observer and say, wow, this person has extreme, changes in behavior, nothing to do with me. I'm going to just stand over here and not engage. I'm going to let it impact me the best way possible, or rather less impact. I say to my clients, it's like putting on the Teflon suit. It's like you put your legs in, your arms in, zip it up, put on, and just let whatever's being said, especially if it's coming directed at you, which sometimes that stuff can, just let it slide off. It has nothing to do with you. But I also believe that knowing that we can never change the other person's behavior, we can only change, how we're reacting to it. That might not be good enough for some people to just wear a Teflon suit. Some people can look without judgment. That's the other thing. I shouldn't be judging. No, you can assess whether this is something you want to live with or not. That's it. And so it's an assessment. It's not a judgment. It's not like they're a terrible person. How could they be this? They're schizophrenic. They go from Jekyll to Hyde. You don't have to even go into all of that. You just simply like, okay, it's not me. They're in their separate reality. I feel, maybe I'm sensitive, and I feel the movement of energy going up and down. Am I comfortable with it? Can I live with it? Or do I want to be out of here? But I think, our feelings are informing us. And I know so many people that stay in relationships that are painful for them, because they think they shouldn't be feeling what they shouldn't be feeling pain because it's coming from my thinking. So therefore I should be feeling this way. And I think that's where it can get very muddy in the 3 principles community. And that's why I love doing the work that I do, because I feel I really help people bring clarity to, and I call it, if somebody doesn't want to be in a situation anymore with the Jekyll and Hyde character, it's leave with love. But it's okay to stay there too. Just
Yeah, and I think there's another wave of like, okay, if the more grounded in understanding the truth of who we are as individuals, you know, I say if we have, again, we have less concepts on how people are supposed to be, and we have more goodwill toward this person. We don't have to like them, but we can have goodwill toward them as a human being. It could also be a space of having conversation, like, you know, like you even invite the conversation. Like, I don't know if can I share how I experienced you sometimes, and I don't know if you're aware that sometimes, the tone in your voice or your directive can be quite curt and direct, and I'm just saying that's my experience, and I don't know if you're aware of that, or even if you would care to know how I experience you sometimes. So I mean, but you have to have a receptive party who's willing to hear what you have to say, you know? If you can.
I love that you said that, Cherie, because I think I went to the other,
No, I think it's wide open. No,
it is wide open. Yeah. And, some people with sort of Jekyll and Hyde personality traits, some people, it's just so innocent. And they're like, oh my God, I had no idea my moods were, I was emotionally vomiting everywhere. It could be simple as that. And then there's other people that refuse to look at it. And I was talking more about the people that refuse to look at it. But without a doubt, any healthy relationship, you'd have that conversation. You would just be curious. Again, be curious. It seems like you really feel things deeply that can take you from a place of peace to a place of, anger. I'm curious how that feels for you. So you can have the conversation from a very neutral place.
But by no means are we suggesting tolerate anything that is abusive or not okay with you.
Exactly. And I think that's why as I say, I'm so passionate, because I think, if we don't, sometimes people are in relationships that are, emotionally abusive. They don't have the scars or the bruises or the black eyes to say this is abuse, but it is emotionally abusive if somebody's not going to look at their behavior and not change it and feel entitled to behave that way and entitled to take it out on the other person. It's okay to call it what it is, which is an abusive relationship. And there are tools, like I said, to help people stay in them where they suffer less. But it's also everybody's right to just say, I don't want to live like this. It's okay. So.
Okay, great. That was helpful. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
For the question. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. Doreen.
All right. I'm not sure I understand how to be Teflon, because something about me has invited that person to my life, and I made some sort of choice to connect with them. So I don't really see it as, I think it brings a chance for me to self-evaluate. What has attracted whoever I am to a Jekyll and Hyde person? And therefore, it's not about them and nothing about me. I think I have to recognize that I kind of look at all relationships as being on a seesaw, where the fulcrum is what we think we're both invested in. And when one does this, the other can hardly find their balance or something. So whatever I do affects the other if we're both chosen to be in this fulcrum in the relationship. So it's a matter to me of this being an opportunity for more self-awareness about myself.
Yeah.
And yeah, Dell, go ahead.
No, it's brilliant. And I love that you brought the seesaw up, because I use that a lot. And again, I don't want to go too much diagnosing everybody. And again, in the principles, we don't diagnose. We're talking to a set of behaviors. Everybody, they're not their behavior, but there are some people that have a pretty set, behavior. And, often, if they have like a narcissistic personality behavior, some of that is the Jekyll and Hyde. It's the extremes of emotions. They can be abusive, and then they rescue, and then that's that cognizant dissonance that happens, and your brain gets scrambled, and you're like, well, hang on a minute, what's going on here? But what I always say, and what I had to do for myself is, when I found myself in my last narcissistic relationship, I was like, what have I done to get myself here? It's, I cannot keep blaming the other person. I'm doing something to attract this into my life. And that's why I took the time out to really, really heal that part of me. Now, having grown up with childhood trauma, I was, as I said, a people pleaser, always overgiving, always trying to sort of secure love by giving too much. So what often happens, that's called codependent behavior. So you've got the codependent over here, and then you've got somebody over here. Usually the Jekyll and Hyde characters can be quite selfish. They're, it's all about them, their needs, their wants. And what happens is, as you say, initially the attraction is you've got somebody that is an overgiver and somebody who's an overtaker, and it's the perfect fit. It's like, oh my God, and often codependents look at strong, powerful men or whatever as, you complete me, I need you.
Jerry Maguire.
Yeah, you've got something that I haven't got. I lack self-worth. You seem to have confidence. And so it's that great match. But what ends up happening is that seesaw, exactly as you said, you got that seesaw. Now you've got the under, the one that doesn't have that too much self-esteem or sense of entitlement. They keep giving and giving. It's like the seesaw goes down a bit there. And then up here is the person that has high self-esteem, high feelings of entitlement, high, me. So what has to happen, that type of relationship will be on that angle. And what needs to happen to have a healthy relationship is that person up here, the more selfish person, needs to lower their level of selfishness, and that person needs to heighten their level of entitlement. And that level of entitlement is not an unhealthy type entitlement, but it's that healthy sense of, I'm giving more than I can afford to give. I want a reciprocal relationship. I want it to be more equal. So they have to sort of raise their level of self-worth, and the person up here needs to calm down a bit with, feeling it's all about them. And then you have a healthy relationship. Now, not, as Cherie said, it takes two. Some people don't want to change the dynamic. But if you are in a new relationship or out of a dysfunctional relationship that's painful like that has that dynamic, before entering into a new relationship, it's really important to go through the things I listed, like know that you're as important to anybody else, have healthy boundaries, understand separate reality, all of that stuff. So when you are healthier and you're not such a people pleaser where you end up negating all your own needs because you want to be liked by everybody, and you stand in the truth of who you are. A lot of people, like I grew up needless and wantless, because that's the only way I could, stay close to my mother, was to not have a need or a want. And I carried that in life. And then I'd get in a relationship with no needs and no wants. And then at one point I would try and change the dynamic and go, well, what about me? What about me? And they'd be like, well, what do you mean about you? You're needless and wantless. Don't go and change the rules on me. So it's really getting in touch with what are your needs and wants. Really healthy esteem. Knowing that you are perfectly whole just as you are. Nothing needs to be fixed. Nothing needs to be hidden. Really just stand in your power, and you will meet an equal, somebody that is equally healthy, has a healthier self-esteem, not an overblown sense of entitlement. And you will be equal. But you're absolutely right. And I love that you brought that up, because it really is, as I said, we can only change ourselves. We cannot change another person. So if we don't, carry on.
Well, may I carry on? Because
We're right at time. So if we can make it short, we're right at time. So
why don't I stop and let someone else kind of come in, Cherie? Yeah.
oh, no. I mean, if you can finish your thought, and then we'll move on to close. So
Well, the thought is that a book called A Woman of Independent Means is about how a Victorian mother saw marriage and her granddaughter, or somebody getting married. But it is people who want to be connected, and so they view themselves as being on a tandem bike, as opposed to two people on their independent means of going forward in life and reaching across the handlebars to stay connected. But if I want to go ahead or you want to stop and get ice cream or something, we'll meet further. And so that is a little different than the seesaw too, because you can get off without disturbing the other person's momentum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's two interdependent people that come together and create a healthy interdependence. There's a big difference between that enmeshment where, you're feeling each other and everything like that. So it's been, we need each other in a healthy way. We want to be with each other. We're connecting people. That's what we do. Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's a beautiful analogy.
So thank you all for coming to the conversation. I mean, I'm thrilled to have Dell as a guest. And Dell has a weekly show and podcast called Insightful Conversations. And that's at Adey-Jones.com, and no hyphens in the URL. So
Dell and then Adey-Jones is hyphenated. So.
For your URL, is it hyphenated?
No, sorry. It's all one word.
Great.
No spaces, no hyphens. Yeah.
Great for the URL. And so I loved having this conversation with you, Dell. I loved everyone's participation and willingness to come into the conversation. And as always, if you have any other questions that we didn't address, send them to me. I can forward them to Dale, and we can share it back with you if you have something that you didn't get a chance to ask. Thank you for joining today's conversation, Losing Clarity in Relationships. I hope that you gained some understanding that for fresh relationships to be born, what's really helpful is to shed any concepts that we even have around relationships, to really give yourselves the opportunity to see your own wholeness, see the wholeness in others, and also to really embrace your natural self. You don't need a better marketed version. How you are is real. How you are is enough to have a thriving, successful relationship. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to speaking with you on the next conversation.